Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into a wildly captivating evolutionary detective story. You see, for decades, scientists have grappled with a really profound question. Why do we age and die? Think about it. It seems completely counterintuitive to the very basic biological goal of survival. So let's walk through the evidence and explore a really groundbreaking concept from João Carlos Holland de Barcelos called the awarded sun theory. It's a fascinating idea that might just finally solve biology's absolute greatest mystery.
Okay, so did you know that life on Earth actually started out completely immortal? It's true, and it's a massive biological paradox. Primitive life forms, like bacteria, reproduce by just splitting into identical clones indefinitely. There's no ticking clock, no aging, and no death. Given a safe environment, they just keep dividing forever and ever. Immortality isn't just some science fiction concept, it was literally the original biological default.
Now, this totally flips our usual assumptions upside down. We tend to consider complex organisms, like, your pet dog or you and me, to be highly evolved. And yet, somewhere along the evolutionary timeline, we acquired a programmed self-destruct sequence right in our DNA. We are quite literally designed to slowly break down and die. So why on earth would advanced organisms be mortal, while the simplest little single-celled blobs are not?
Let's start breaking this down. Part 1, the biological mechanism, or the ticking clock.
To actually figure out why we die, we first have to find our biological ticking clock. Discovered by Dr. Leonard Hayflick back in 1961, human somatic cells, which are just our regular body cells, have a very strict limit. They can only divide about 50 times. See, at the ends of our chromosomes are these protective caps called telomeres, and with every single cell division, they shrink. When they finally run out, the cell just expires. This is known as the Hayflick limit, and it's essentially your body's built-in internal countdown timer.
But here is the absolutely incredible twist. Your body is actually hiding a secret. Our reproductive germ cells produce an enzyme called telomerase, and its one and only job? Rebuilding those telomeres. It effectively makes those specific cells immortal. So this proves that our bodies actually possess the internal machinery for eternal life right now. Yet biology deliberately, purposely chooses not to use this power for the rest of our body. Crazy, right?
Which brings us to a glaring, almost frustrating question. If the machinery for eternal life is literally sitting right there inside us, what evolutionary pressure forced mortality upon us? What possible advantage could there be in designing a creature with a built-in expiration date?
That brings us to part 2, the lineup of suspects. These are the failed scientific theories. For over a century, some of the most brilliant minds have tried to crack this case. Back in 1882, Weismann thought aging simply cleared space for the youth. Makes sense, right? Then in 52, Medawer argued that genetic damage just naturally builds up when we get old. A few years later, in 57, Williams suggested something called antagonistic pleiotropy, which is just a fancy way of saying some genes make us strong in our youth, but then accidentally end up killing us later on. And finally, in 1977, Kirkwood argued our bodies are just way too energy expensive to maintain forever. But, well, every single one of those theories hit a massive brick wall. Why? It all comes down to the group selection paradox. You see, classic Darwinian evolution only cares about individual survival. If a random mutation created an immortal individual, that mutant would live longer, breed infinitely, and just completely take over the population. Evolution ruthlessly eliminates anything that sacrifices individual fitness for the so-called good of the group. So, classic Darwinism simply cannot explain programmed death.
To move forward, we need a totally new angle. Part 3. The gene's eye view, shifting perspectives. To actually solve this mystery, we literally have to pivot away from orthodox Darwinism over to neo-Darwinism. And here is the harsh, unvarnished truth of it all. Evolution doesn't actually care if you survive. It only cares if your underlying genetic code survives. To natural selection, your physical body is nothing more than a temporary, completely disposable robot built solely to carry around and protect your immortal genes. And we actually see this ruthless genetic priority all over nature. Think about a mother bear risking her own life to fight off a massive predator to save her cubs, or a male praying mantis literally offering himself up as a meal to the female right after mating. I mean, sacrificing yourself makes absolutely zero sense for individual survival. But it makes perfect sense if it guarantees that your genes, which are now safely inside your cubs or the female, survive and spread.
Keeping that in mind, let's look at part 4, the paradox of sex.
Okay, keeping that gene-centric perspective in our back pockets, we run into another massive biological puzzle: Asexual reproduction, basically just cloning yourself, is incredibly efficient. Sexual reproduction, on the other hand, is a massive, massive headache. You have to expend immense energy just finding a willing and capable partner, plus it wastes a ton of biological resources creating males whose primary biological function is essentially just delivering genetic material, while females have to do all the heavy lifting of gestation. From a pure energy standpoint, sex is terribly inefficient.
And honestly, it gets worse. You lose half your genes. If you just clone yourself asexually, you pass on 100% of your code, but in sexual reproduction, you only pass on 50%. For a selfish gene, giving up half of its real estate is a monumental penalty. The only possible reason this incredibly wasteful system hasn't been completely wiped out by evolution must be the unmatched, ridiculously powerful advantage of genetic variability that you get through mixing.
Hang with me here as we dive into Part 5, the bizarre analogy, wealth for the dead. So the author presents this thought experiment. Imagine a totally bizarre world where a government offers a cool $1 million to the family of anyone who ends their own life. Now the individual dies, obviously, but because their immediate family, who naturally shares a massive chunk of their exact genetic code, receives this immense wealth, that family completely thrives and multiplies rapidly. This strange, kind of dark analogy proves a wild point. A lethal trade can actually be evolutionarily successful, but only if that ultimate sacrifice drastically benefits the broader genetic family left behind.
Which brings us right to the core of today's explainer. Part 6, Teoria do Filho Premiado, or the awarded son theory.
So how does this all connect? Well, here is the grand reveal. The true underlying purpose of sexual reproduction is basically a biological lottery system. Really beneficial mutations are incredibly rare in nature. If you're reproducing asexually, waiting around for two great mutations to happen takes an absolute eternity. But sex shuffles the genetic deck. It is the ultimate fast-track way to combine two incredibly rare, highly beneficial mutations from entirely different parents into one single offspring. This child hits the ultimate jackpot, essentially becoming a superorganism. This, right here, is the awarded son.
And suddenly, the ticking clock makes perfect sense. If sex occasionally creates this genetically superior awarded son, the absolute worst thing the older, less adapted generations could possibly do is stick around forever, eating all the food and taking up all the space. We are literally biologically programmed to age and die simply to get out of the way. Our mortality is a sacrifice that frees up precious resources so our genetically upgraded descendants have the room they need to dominate.
So when you put it all together, the telomere countdown clocks, the incredibly heavy price of sexual reproduction, and the driving force of the selfish gene, it leaves us with a truly chilling but honestly profoundly beautiful thought. You and I, we're disposable vehicles. We are temporary vessels built by immortal genes to play the ultimate evolutionary lottery. We are designed to mix our codes, pass on our absolute best parts, and then gracefully fade away so the future can thrive. It really makes you wonder, are you just a stepping stone for the awarded son?